If you're about to tour an apartment, make sure you ask them these questions.
Hey, I'm Alex.
And I'm Philip.
And we teach you what you need to know about being a grown-up.
Because adulting shouldn't suck.
In this video, we're going to cover the top 20 questions that you should be asking when you go to view an apartment. We both had our fair share of moving as adults, and we've learned quite a bit of stuff from it. When you're first moving out, a lot of these questions are going to seem like common sense to a lot of people, but if you've never gone through this process or seen your parents go through this process of moving in somewhere, then how do you know what you don't know, right? So I know I didn't know a lot of these things when I first moved out.
If you need help getting your rental application approved, make sure that you check out our video, How to Get Your Apartment Application Approved. It's a great video, and it comes with a free downloadable rental application template to help see what kind of information that you will need to complete on an application so that you can be prepared when you find your apartment that you're interested in. The link's going to be in the description below.
Asking the right questions when you're touring a place to live is really going to help you decide if it's the right place for you. We created another free downloadable checklist with all the questions that we cover in this video, so don't worry about taking notes or trying to remember everything that we talk about, because I know we talk fast. We made it easy for you. Just click on the link in the description below.
Number 1, what's required to move in? This is an important question to ask because not all properties operate the same. For example, the property might only require first month's rent to move in, while other properties might require first and last month's rent, plus a security deposit that's equal to the first month's rent to move in.
In addition to how much you need to pay to get the keys to the place, what happens if this is a big apartment building? Do you need to reserve the elevator for a moving day? Do they have a place for you to park a U-Haul or a moving truck while you're moving?
Number 2, how soon can I move in? This is another important question to ask when you're viewing apartments. The property might not have any availability, and they could be showing you apartments based off of future vacancies.
That's so annoying.
Depending on your situation, this might not work for you.
Number 3 is how much is rent and how can you pay rent? Hopefully you know the answer to that question before you view the apartment, but it's good to double check and ask how much rent is. In some instances, the property they might be showing you isn't the actual property that you'd be renting, but one similar to it. You want to make sure the apartment that you're viewing is going to be the one that you're going to rent. So the apartment you could get might not be as nice as the one that they showed you, or it might be in a different location in the complex that you don't like. So make sure you verify what it is that you're viewing is going to be the same exact thing as what you're trying to rent.
You also want to ask how you pay rent each month. Some places want checks dropped off at the front office. Some places want electronic payments from your bank account, and some places accept Venmo. It all depends on the property management. If they only accept checks and you don't have any checks, this might be an issue for you.
Who even uses checks?
I don't know.
Number 4 is how much is the security deposit? This is a really important question to know, and in most cases, the security deposit is equal to 1 month's rent. But there are a lot of cases where it could be more or less depending on different factors like your credit history or your rental history.
Number 5, are there any income or credit requirements? Most places are going to require that you make 3 times the amount of rent in your monthly income. So if rent is $1,000, then they want you to make at least $3,000 a month for you to qualify for the apartment. It's important to ask if this requirement can be spread across you and any roommates that you might have, or if this is an individual requirement.
Some places will require you to have a certain credit score to move into their property, regardless of how much money you make each month. If the property that you're viewing requires you to have a credit score of a 720 and you've only got a 650, then you're going to want to know that before you spend the money on the application fee.
Yeah. Number 6, am I allowed to add or remove a roommate? While you might start your process with or without a roommate, things don't always work out. Knowing how the property is going to handle adding or removing people from the lease is super important information. For example, my sister had moved out with her best friend at the time. 4 months into it, and they couldn't stand each other, but they weren't going to be able to get the other person off the lease without incurring a penalty. So they were stuck together for 12 months until the lease was over.
That sucks. Number 7 is, what are the leasing options? Are they 12-month leases, which is pretty standard, whereas other places offer shorter leases that are month-to-month, 3 months, 6-month, 9-month options. This is important to know because if you're, let's say, a college student and you're only going to live somewhere for 9 months while school's in session and then you're going to go home for the summer, you don't want to pay for those other 3 months. You're not going to want to sign a 12-month lease. You're also going to want to know if any of the rules or what the rules are in the lease that, they don't allow you to put holes in the wall so you can't hang things, or, they got quiet hours and the community rules that you need to be aware of so you can't drive through the complex bumping your music because you got subs in the back without getting a fine, right? So there's a lot you need to know that's in that lease that's really important information.
Don't forget to ask about leasing renewal options. Sometimes landlords plan on renovating your apartment or house, and they might not be re-rentable for that term. This is an important thing to know if you planned on staying put for a few years.
All right, number 8 is how often does rent go up and by how much? While you're talking about the leasing options, it's also a great time to ask them how often they raise rent and by how much, because it's really common for your rent to increase after a year, which is why people tend to sign longer leases, because it ensures that they don't have a rental increase.
Mm-hmm.
When you sign a lease, you're basically saying you're going to pay however much money it is for X amount of months, and then once that lease expires, they can increase the price. It happens all the time, and depending on where you live, it'll determine on how much it increases. So right now, on average, rent can jump from $50 to $400 a year, depending on where you live and how much rent costs. Since 2020, it's been a lot harder for people to afford apartments because on average, right now, rent is over $2,000 a month in the U.S., and it just keeps going up because they just keep raising rent.
It's expensive out there. Number 9, is renter's insurance required? Renter's insurance isn't required everywhere, but some landlords will require you to have rental insurance for your application to be approved. And honestly, rental insurance is really cheap. We're talking like $15 to $30 a month, and it provides you with a lot of protection in the event that something bad happens. So even if your landlords don't require you to have renter's insurance, it's still a great idea to have it. If you have more questions about renter's insurance, we have a great video on it, and the link's going to be in the description below.
I know I had to use it twice. Once my car got broken into, and they stole my subs, probably because I was an idiot going through the apartment complex with my music too loud. But second time I had to use it was way more important because somebody broke into my apartment when I wasn't there, and they stole everything. They cleaned me out. So I had to file, I don't know, I think I got back like $10,000 or $12,000. It was a long time ago. And I had to go buy all my new stuff. But if I didn't have that renter's insurance, it was only, I think at the time it was like $12 a month. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't have had any of the money to buy all that stuff back or to get all that stuff back. So definitely worth it in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Check out the video. All right, number 10 is, are the utilities included? If you're moving into an apartment, it's common for the electricity and water and garbage to be included in your monthly rent. However, this isn't always the case. So, it's really important to ask and see if it's included in your rent or not.
If you're renting a house or a duplex, it's pretty common for the cost of electricity, water, and garbage to not be included in your monthly rent. This means that you're going to have to call those companies, create an account in your name, and be responsible for paying those monthly bills like electricity, water, and garbage.
All right, number 11 is, if the utilities aren't included, ask the landlord how much they cost on average per month. If the landlords don't have that information, you can literally just call the utility companies, and then they can tell you how much the bill was for that address previously.
Number 12, ask if the locks were changed between tenants. You would assume that this is common practice, but you'd be surprised. And you know what they say about assume? It makes an ass out of you and me. Some places will say that they collect the keys from the previous tenants when they move out, so there's no need to change the locks, but that doesn't mean that the previous tenants didn't make any copies of the keys. You want to make sure that you and the landlords are the only people with access to your property.
Number 13, how do maintenance requests work? Unfortunately, stuff breaks all the time, especially if you're renting an older place. Knowing how your management handles those types of issues is an important thing to know. There's nothing worse than being stuck with something that's been broken in your house or your apartment and then having your management take forever to fix it, especially air conditioners, hot water heaters, different appliances. These are all things that you're paying for, so make sure they get them fixed in a timely manner.
Number 14, what amenities are included, if any? Knowing what is available to you is a must. My buddy had stayed in this apartment complex once where he literally just had to put his trash bag by his front door and the complex would come and pick it up and take it to the dumpster. It was wild.
If you're staying in an apartment complex that has a gym or a swimming pool or a hot tub or some kind of community area that you can have gatherings, you're going to want to know how they work. Are they first come, first served basis? Are they available based on reservations. You have to pay extra to use them. These are all important things you're going to want to know about those different areas that you're paying to access.
Also, don't go and get a place that has all of these nice amenities that costs a lot of money just because they have the nice amenities. If you're stuck working 3 jobs just to pay for these amenities that you're not going to get to use all the time, it's no fun being house broke.
No, it
Not
sucks
at
working
all.
3 jobs to pay your bills.
Mm-hmm.
Number 15 is, what is the parking situation like? Unless you have a bike or you're taking public transportation everywhere, you're going to want to know what the parking situation's like. It's super important. Some places charge extra per car. Some places only offer parking for 1 space.
Mm-hmm.
Some places offer parking for free, but it's limited and it's a first come first served basis. And then some places only offer street parking, which you have to pay extra for if you're going to park on the street. And then if you park on the street in other places, they're going to tow your car because you parked in the wrong place. So if you've got roommates or you've got multiple vehicles, these are really important things to find out, because if you got to park half a mile away from your front door and you didn't know that until you got the keys to your apartment, that's the wrong time to figure it out. Parking situations are really important, and it sucks if it's a bad situation and they don't have enough spaces.
Yeah,
I lived in a place like that and I hated it. Drove me nuts.
it's the worst. Number 16, what's the pet policy? Some places don't allow pets. So if you have any fur babies or animals that live in a tank or a cage, you're going to want to ask the management what their policy is. Some places allow certain types of breeds of animals, but they might not allow other types of breeds like mice and snakes because they don't want them to escape and multiply.
Ugh.
Cats are typically accepted, but larger dogs that weigh more than a certain weight, or they're vicious breeds like German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, etc., might not be considered. I have seen places allow these types of dogs if they have renter's insurance or pet insurance against attacking other people, but that's going to depend on the landlords. Large fish tanks aren't always allowed either. Some landlords are concerned that large tanks can break, causing massive water damage, so they don't allow them. If your landlord does allow pets, there's likely going to be a pet security deposit or a monthly pet fee.
I know when I moved down here to Arizona, I had 1 place that I could move into because I had a dog and a cat. And I don't have a big dog. I have a boxer that's like 65 pounds. And because it's technically a vicious dog, which I don't know how that's a vicious dog.
Yeah.
That's one of the goofiest dogs on the planet. But anyways, it disqualified me from almost everywhere. Right, because I moved down here, I was having a house built, and I had to rent somewhere, and I almost couldn't rent anywhere. Whereas, like, you have a cat dog that weighs like 3 pounds, and they're not denied anywhere. It's smaller than my cat.
12 pounds? Excuse me.
He carries it in his purse.
I can.
All right, number 17 is, what is the guest policy? This might seem kind of dumb or silly, but it's a real thing. Landlords don't have an issue if you have friends come over and stay for a couple nights. They have an issue if they stay for long periods of time. And typically the standard length that a guest can stay at your place is like 10 to 14 days. Anything longer than that, they're going to want to fill out an application because they're going to think of them as a roommate. Mm-hmm. Some landlords can be more lenient on that, and some other landlords can be a lot stricter. So, if you got friends that want to couch surf, an easy way to kick them out is after a week or 2, tell them the landlord wants them to fill out a rental application if they're going to be there long term, and they're probably going to bounce pretty quick after that.
Number 18. How far in advance do I need to give a notice before moving out? When you're moving out, it's required that you give landlords a notice that you're moving out. A 30-day notice is pretty common, but some places can require more days or less days for their notice. If you don't give them the proper notice, you could forfeit your security deposit or have your lease automatically renewed.
At an apartment, we had to let them know 90 days in advance. That way they had plenty of time to find somebody else to fill that apartment on top of getting it cleaned after we moved out. So it was a long time.
Because they have to market the apartment to be vacant so other people can come in, because they don't want to have an apartment vacant for like a week or a month because they're going to lose money. So they want it to get cleaned, repaired, and ready for the next person.
All right, number 19 is subletting approved? And you're probably wondering, what is subletting? It's also called subleasing. Mm-hmm. And this is when a tenant rents a room to somebody else, and the subtenant has to pay the rent, they undergo a background check by the landlord, and they have to comply with all the same terms of the lease. Life
happens, and sometimes you need to break your lease before it is up. In some cases, landlords will let you sublease to a new tenant for the remainder of your lease, while other landlords would consider this a breach of contract, and if caught doing it, you could get charged a penalty or evicted.
And I mean, if you have to, break your lease early and you find somebody else to take over that lease and they still get paid, a lot of landlords are willing to go along with it.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but a lot are, because you showed that you were proactive. You found on someone else who's going to continue paying that bill. That's pretty important, and in their eyes, they're still getting all that profit. So
yeah, and then they don't have to go and look for somebody to rent out your apartment because you had already did that. So they don't have to pay any money to market the apartment or to clean it and prepare it, because they're just gonna take it over.
You did their job for them.
Yeah.
All right, number 20 is there a penalty for breaking your lease? Knowing what happens if you need to break your lease is going to help you decide the length of a lease that you should get. If you're moving regularly for work, or you're getting ready to graduate from college and possibly going to relocate, signing a lease longer isn't always going to be the most ideal situation. So know what your current situation is and then determine the length of the lease based upon that.
I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, so you can't just be like, is this going to be where I'm going to be in 12 months? I mean, no, obviously not. You're not going to know for sure 100%. But do your best to, examine the variables that you might have and base your decision off of that type of stuff. It's common for landlords to charge you whatever amount of money is remaining on your lease for you to be able to break your lease early. For example, if you leased a place for 12 months with rent being $2,000 a month, you signed a legal agreement saying that you're going to give the landlord $24,000 over a 12-month period. If you break the lease after 9 months, you only paid the landlord $18,000. They could still hold you liable for the other $6,000 that you owe them. This exact situation happened to my sister and a roommate that she wasn't getting along with, and they couldn't afford to break the lease, so they were stuck together. If you think that you're going to break your lease, it's best for you to see if they can get a month-to-month option or a shorter lease.
Yeah, because that's freaking expensive. Who has $6,000 to break a lease just to go, put a down payment and pay first and last months on another apartment? It just doesn't happen. I mean, maybe you're breaking it to go live back at home. But either way, it's freaking expensive, and most people can't afford to do it. There you have it. If you ask these 20 questions while you're viewing a place to live, you should be well prepared and ready to go. Moving is a big deal, especially if you're doing it for the first time. Take your time and do it right. If you mess it up, it could be an expensive mistake that makes it really hard for you to rent another place in the future. And remember, we created a free downloadable checklist with all these questions on it. So make sure you check it out in the description below.
If you like this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. And in the comments below, let us know which one of these questions you thought was most helpful.
And we'll see you in the next video.